The room fell silent the moment Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas leaned into the microphone. Her voice carried a fire that made even her critics shift in their seats. "This," she began, pointing to a stack of papers on the desk, "is not about protecting voters. This is about stripping Americans of their voice." The papers were Trump's latest push, a plan to tighten voter ID laws nationwide. Supporters claimed it was about security. But Crockett knew what it really meant, silencing thousands of working-class Americans, seniors, and young people who didn't have easy access to the required IDs. The tension in the chamber was unbearable. Members of Congress whispered, reporters scribbled, and cameras captured every word. Crockett's tone grew sharper. "You don't care about fraud, you care about power, and you're willing to steal it." For a second, the room froze. Then murmurs broke out, some in agreement, others in outrage. But Crockett didn't flinch, and just when it seemed she had cornered Trump's allies, an unexpected voice rose from the back, a Republican lawmaker no one thought would speak. It was Adam Kinzinger, the former Republican congressman once known for breaking ranks against Trump. He stood, visibly shaken, his voice quieter, but cutting through the noise. "She's right," he said. Gasps echoed across the room. "This isn't about voter fraud. It's about fear. Fear that if every American can vote, you lose." The air shifted. Allies of Trump shot him glares of betrayal. Some shouted over him, but Kinzinger didn't back down. He continued, "When we deny people the ballot, we deny the very idea of America." Jasmine Crockett turned, surprised. For the first time in hours, the fire in her eyes softened. In that moment, the battle no longer felt like Democrat versus Republican. It felt like truth versus power. But then came the twist. Trump's legal team, seated near the front, handed a folder across the table. Inside were proposed state-level laws already lined up, waiting to roll out if the federal push failed. Crockett's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The fight wasn't just in Congress. It was already spreading across the states. Crockett steadied herself, holding the folder high for everyone to see. "This isn't a debate anymore," she declared. "It's a roadmap for stealing democracy, one state at a time." Her words sent a chill through the chamber. Reporters rushed out to file breaking alerts. Protesters outside began chanting louder, their voices rattling the windows. But then, the emotional twist no one expected. Crockett's phone buzzed, a message from her hometown in Texas. A grandmother she knew personally, a woman who had marched for civil rights decades ago, was denied the right to vote under new state ID rules. Crockett's throat tightened. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting tears. This isn't theory. It's already happening. People who built this country are being silenced. The chamber grew still again, not out of respect but out of fear. Because if she was right, the power grab was already in motion, and stopping it would be nearly impossible. And just as Crockett raised her voice again, security stormed into the chamber, rushing toward the front row where Trump's legal team sat. The sudden arrival of security sent panic through the chamber. Cameras whipped toward the commotion as two officers confronted a member of Trump's legal team. A folder had been slipped under the table, filled with private notes, outlining strategies to challenge votes in battleground states. Gasps rippled across the room. Crockett locked eyes with the lead officer, demanding, "Where did this come from?" The officer hesitated. "It wasn't supposed to be seen." Crockett stepped forward, her voice steady but burning. "You mean the American people weren't supposed to know?" She turned back to the room, raising the folder high once more. "This isn't about one election. This is about controlling every election that comes after." The silence broke into shouting. Allies of Trump roared back, accusing her of twisting facts, while others demanded the documents be preserved as evidence. For a split second, Crockett looked exhausted, but then something fierce flickered in her eyes. The fight was no longer just about exposing Trump's voter ID push. It was about stopping a blueprint for permanent power. And then, from the gallery above, a protester's voice thundered down, "We've already seen this in Georgia." Every head jerked upward. The protester, A middle-aged man in a worn jacket shouted until security grabbed him. "My mother lost her vote in Georgia. She's 82 years old." His words pierced the air before he was pulled away. Crockett's hand tightened on the desk. That testimony wasn't theater, it was lived pain. She seized the moment. Did you hear him? Did you hear what your laws are doing? For the first time, Trump's allies shifted uneasily. Some avoided her gaze. Others barked louder, but their voices rang hollow against the weight of real stories. Then, unexpectedly, one of the younger Republican lawmakers, barely in his 30s, stood. His voice cracked as he admitted, "My own cousin couldn't vote last year. She had no driver's license. She worked 2 jobs and still couldn't get the paperwork in time." The chamber froze. This was a crack in the wall no one saw coming. Crockett leaned in, softer now, almost pleading. "This isn't left versus right. This is people versus power. And if you don't see that, history will judge every single one of us." Her words echoed and landed like thunder. The tension was unbearable, like a storm ready to break. Just as Crockett's words reverberated, the chamber doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't protesters or security. It was a courier with an urgent message from a federal judge in Texas. The judge had issued an emergency ruling. One of Trump's proposed ID laws had already been challenged in court and struck down as unconstitutional. The announcement sent the chamber into chaos. Cheers erupted from one side, fury from the other. Crockett gripped the paper, reading the ruling aloud so no one could twist the truth. The law creates an undue burden on voters and violates the core principles of equal access. Her voice broke for the first time, raw with emotion. "This is proof. Proof that we're not crazy. Proof that democracy is still worth fighting for." But just when relief seemed possible, a chilling revelation followed. The ruling also disclosed that similar bills were already advancing in 10 other states, backed by millions in funding and coordinated legal teams. Crockett lowered the page, her voice trembling with urgency. "If we don't stop this now, it spreads everywhere." And then, dead silence. The silence in the chamber was shattered by the sound of pounding on the doors. Outside, protesters had swelled into the thousands, chanting so loudly the walls seemed to shake. "Let us vote! Let us vote!" Crockett stood firm, but her chest tightened. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a battlefield for the future of democracy. A senior Republican, his face red with anger, slammed his hand on the desk. "You're riling people up with lies," he barked. But before he could continue, Crockett interrupted, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "The only lie here is the one that says some Americans deserve fewer rights than others." The crowd outside roared louder, as if answering her. Then came the twist. Another envelope was rushed in, this one from a state board in Arizona. It contained evidence of thousands of provisional ballots already rejected because of new ID requirements. Many belonged to Native American voters who lived miles from the nearest government office. Crockett held the paper high, her voice cracking with fury. "They're targeting the first people of this land." The room erupted, half in shame, half in denial. The chamber grew hotter, suffocating under the weight of exposed truth. Reporters scrambled out the doors, broadcasting live updates that spread across the country in seconds. Crockett's phone buzzed again. This time, it was her own staff back in Dallas. A young college student, someone she had personally registered to vote the year before, was turned away at the polls. The reason? Her student ID wasn't accepted under the new rules. Jasmine's hand trembled as she read the message. For a moment, her fierce posture cracked, revealing a flash of heartbreak. But she steadied herself, looking straight into the cameras. "This is personal. These are our neighbors, our children, our elders. And if they can silence them, they can silence all of us." Suddenly, murmurs rose from Trump's side. One of his lawyers leaned in close to whisper something to a congressman. Crockett caught it. The word was clear: federal takeover. Her blood ran cold. If state-level suppression wasn't enough, they were planning to push even further, stripping power from local election boards altogether. The fight wasn't just expanding, it was turning into a full-scale siege. The air was electric with fear and defiance. Crockett slammed her hand on the desk. A federal takeover? That means Washington decides who votes and who doesn't. That means your neighbor, your grandmother, your son, gone from the rolls with the stroke of a pen. The gallery gasped. Some lawmakers shifted nervously, realizing this wasn't abstract anymore. It was a nightmare knocking on every American's door. At that very moment, the chanting outside stopped. An eerie silence fell over the building. Crockett froze, straining to hear. Then came a single voice, raw with emotion, echoing up from the street. "My father died for the right to vote." The crowd outside erupted again, louder than ever before. Crockett's eyes welled, but she refused to let tears fall. She raised her fist toward the sound. "And we will not let that sacrifice be in vain." But as her words thundered through the chamber, a staffer rushed in with breaking news. Several states had already scheduled emergency sessions to pass even stricter ID laws, doubling down before Congress could act. The walls seemed to close in. Time was slipping away. The urgency was unbearable. Crockett knew every hour lost meant another state rushing laws into place. She grabbed the microphone again, her voice echoing through the chamber. "This is not a debate we can postpone. People are losing their rights today." A senior Democrat leaned in, whispering nervously, "Jasmine, slow down. We need to negotiate. We can't afford to fracture the chamber." She pulled away sharply. "Negotiate? With democracy itself on the line? Tell that to the voters already turned away." Her defiance ignited a ripple of cheers from the gallery, but also furious backlash from Trump's allies, who accused her of inciting unrest. Then came the gut punch. A letter slid across her desk from a colleague she trusted. She opened it with shaking hands. It read, "They're pressuring us to compromise. Some Democrats are ready to fold." Crockett's heart sank. Betrayal wasn't just across the aisle, it was seeping into her own. Her jaw tightened. She rose again, louder than ever. "Let it be clear. If anyone here chooses comfort over courage, history will carve your names in stone, not as leaders, but as cowards." The chamber erupted. The betrayal stung, but Crockett refused to waver. She slammed the stack of evidence back onto the desk, her voice trembling with rage. "These papers show the plan. Georgia, Arizona, Texas, Wisconsin, it's the same script copied and pasted across this country. Do you really think it stops here?" The camera zoomed closer. Viewers across the nation saw not just a lawmaker, but a fighter battling for every unseen citizen. But then came a stunning shift. One of Trump's fiercest defenders, a congressman who had mocked Crockett for months, stood up. His face was pale, his hands clenched. I can't defend this anymore," he muttered. "My own state has already purged thousands of names. I can't face my people back home." The room froze. No one saw it coming. For the first time, Crockett's eyes softened. She nodded. "Then stand with us. Not tomorrow, not later. Now." But the moment of fragile hope shattered instantly. Another congressman shouted from the back, "This isn't about voters. This is war." His words cut through the air like a blade, and suddenly, the chamber felt like it might explode. Security tightened as shouting filled the room, lawmakers pointing fingers, some even stepping toward each other in rage. Crockett stayed rooted, her voice rising above the chaos. "If this is war, then I'll fight with truth, and truth is on the side of the people." But the tension only deepened. News alerts flashed across reporters' phones. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Tens of thousands were now surrounding the Capitol, their chants shaking the very ground. Then came the twist no one expected. A group of young activists pushed to the front of the protest line, holding up voter registration cards torn in half, symbols of being denied at the polls. They refused to move until their voices were heard. The chants turned into sobs, raw and unfiltered. A woman cried out, "I just wanted my first vote to count." Inside, Crockett's throat tightened. She pressed her hand to the microphone, speaking not just to Congress, but to the nation. They're not asking for privilege. They're begging for the most basic promise of America. And if we ignore them, We betray every single person who ever bled for this right. The chamber fell deadly quiet. The quiet in the chamber didn't last long. Suddenly, the building's fire alarms blared. Red lights pulsed across the ceiling as officers rushed in, urging lawmakers to evacuate. But Crockett refused to move. "This is no accident," she said, gripping the microphone tighter. "This is intimidation. They want us out of this room so they can finish their scheme in the dark." Some lawmakers hurried for the exits, but Crockett stood planted like stone. Cameras caught the defiance in her face, broadcasting it to millions. Then a breaking update flashed on every reporter's screen. 2 more states had passed emergency ID restrictions within the last hour. Crockett's chest tightened. It was spreading faster than anyone imagined. She raised her voice above the blaring alarms. "Listen to me. If they can silence millions overnight, they can silence you tomorrow. Don't think you're safe because today you're on the inside. Power this dangerous consumes everyone eventually." Her words cut through the panic. Some lawmakers stopped mid-evacuation, staring back at her, and then, as the alarm suddenly cut off, a heavy silence fell. The chamber was no longer just debating policy. It was deciding the fate of democracy itself. The sudden silence was eerie. Reporters whispered that someone had manually shut down the alarms. No one knew who. Crockett gripped the desk tighter. She felt the weight of eyes on her. Allies, opponents, the press, the nation. Then, breaking the tension, a voice rose from the Republican side. A senator leaned forward, his expression grim. "Congresswoman, what happens if you lose this fight?" The question struck like lightning. The room held its breath. Crockett didn't hesitate. "If we lose, America changes forever. Your daughter, my neighbors, our veterans, none of them will recognize this country again, and we will be the ones who let it happen." Her words burned with truth. Some lawmakers shifted, suddenly pale. The enormity of what was happening was sinking in, but before the moment could settle, another courier rushed in, clutching a sealed document. It was an urgent order from the Justice Department. They were investigating whether coordinated voter suppression across multiple states amounted to a criminal conspiracy. Gasps broke out. A hush fell. The chamber wasn't just debating laws anymore. They were on the edge of uncovering crimes. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. A criminal conspiracy, tied to elections, tied to power. Every camera in the chamber turned toward Crockett. She rose slowly, holding the order high. "You hear that? This isn't just wrong, it may be illegal." For the first time, fear flickered across Trump's allies. Some whispered frantically into phones, others stared hard at the floor. Crockett's voice sharpened. "And let me say this clearly. Every single name that signed off on this scheme will be dragged into the light." The protesters outside, already thunderous, erupted into cheers that shook the windows. Inside, the chamber split wide open. Allies shouted to support her, opponents roared in fury. The noise was deafening. Then came the twist. A junior lawmaker from Texas, one who had backed voter ID bills before, stood up trembling. His voice cracked. I gave them information. I didn't know how far it would go, but I was part of it." The room froze. A confession. Crockett's eyes locked on him, her voice cold but steady. "Then you've just made history, because the truth has finally broken through the lies." The chamber erupted into chaos. The chamber spun into chaos after the confession. Some lawmakers demanded an immediate investigation. Others shouted for silence. The young lawmaker who admitted guilt buried his face in his hands, shaking. Crockett's voice cut through the storm. "This is what they don't want America to see. Their own people cracking under the weight of the truth." She lifted the Justice Department's order again, her hand trembling but steady enough to hold the room captive. The people outside, the voices across this nation, they aren't begging. They're demanding their rights back, and it's our duty to answer. Suddenly the building shook as chants from the crowd thundered, "Democracy! Democracy!" For a moment, The walls of Congress felt like they might collapse under the sound. Crockett closed her eyes, tears threatening, then raised her fist toward the gallery. "Your voices are stronger than their fear, and I will carry every one of them until my last breath." But then came breaking news. A live update scrolled across every reporter's phone. 2 governors were preparing to sign emergency bills that night, pushing the crackdown further. Time was running out. Crockett knew the fight wasn't just in this chamber anymore. It was racing ahead in state houses, in governors' offices, in courtrooms. She had one choice: ignite a movement powerful enough to overwhelm the machine. She stepped forward, every camera fixed on her. This battle doesn't end with a vote in Congress. It ends when every American refuses to surrender their voice. If the governors want to sign these bills tonight, then let millions of us answer them tomorrow. The room erupted in chaos again, but her words pierced through, racing onto phones, televisions, and radios across the country. Then, as if on cue, chants outside shifted. Instead of protest, the crowd began singing. It was an old hymn, one sung during the civil rights marches decades ago. Their voices carried like a river into the chamber, breaking even the hardest faces inside. For the first time, Crockett's tears fell openly. She wasn't just fighting an attack. She was standing inside the heartbeat of a new movement, and in that moment, even her fiercest opponents fell quiet, staring at the ground, unable to meet her eyes. The tide had turned. The final hours dragged like years. Phones buzzed, reports poured in, governors raced to sign their bills. But the people, tens of thousands outside and millions watching, stood unshaken. Crockett delivered her closing words, voice breaking but unyielding. "They may try to silence us with pens and papers, but the spirit of democracy cannot be signed away, not tonight, not ever." Her words erupted into thunderous cheers inside and out. Reporters declared it. This was no longer just a congressional debate. It was the birth of a national fight. By midnight, cracks began to spread. Governors delayed their signings under massive pressure. The Justice Department confirmed criminal inquiries were underway. And across the nation, people lit candles outside courthouses, churches, and city halls. A sea of light rising against the dark. Crockett stood at the Capitol steps, looking out over the ocean of faces below. For once, she allowed herself a small smile. The battle wasn't won, but America had awakened. She raised her hand and whispered, "This is only the beginning." If this story moved you, if it made you cry, if it made you feel, then don't just scroll away. Like this video, share it with everyone you know, and subscribe right now, because the fight for democracy isn't over, and together we write the next chapter.